All right, what's up, gang? 59. Was the rejection of the Treaty of Versailles and the League of Nations justified? So I'll give you a little context. First thing is, obviously, from the Constitution, the president negotiates treaties, but that doesn't mean anything because the Senate has to ratify those treaties or approve those treaties. So that's a key point of this whole discussion today, is that President Wilson would negotiate the Treaty of Versailles, which included the League of Nations, but the Senate would never ratify that treaty. And that's an example of checks and balances in action. All right? So let's talk a little bit about how we get to that point in time. So during World War I, Woodrow Wilson puts out what is known as the 14 points. It's Wilson's plan for peace after the war. And remember, Wilson is a reluctant warrior. He doesn't really want to go to war, but once he goes to war, he decides he's going to make sure that this war is not only a war to make the world safe for democracy, but a war to end all wars. So he produces the 14 points, and really it's just 14 ideas by which the world should follow so that there are no wars in the future. Included in this 14 points was the idea of an international organization to settle disputes before war. That international organization would eventually be known as the League of Nations, similar to the United Nations today. All right. So this was the roots or the origins of eventually the United Nations after World War II. This idea of a League of Nations where we'd all get together, and if there was some sort of conflict, you could talk about it before it ended up becoming a war. So this was Wilson's idea. He said, if we have this diplomatic organization, this international organization, we can make sure that war doesn't happen in the future. So the Treaty of Versailles ends the war against Germany, and the Treaty of Versailles included the formation of a League of Nations, which was Wilson's main idea of the 14 points. So the League would be an international body that would be used to avoid war between nations. However, when when Wilson gets on board the ship to come home from France after the war, after he's negotiated the Treaty of Versailles, he comes back to the United States, and there are many senators who are against this idea of the treaty, but most importantly, they're against the idea of the League of Nations. They don't want to join an international body. They don't want to get involved in a war in Europe anymore. They want to go back into their isolationism. They said, hey, we stepped out of it, and it was not fruitful. It wasn't good for us. So now what we have to do is we have to go back into isolationism. So you have Wilson on the one hand who wants to be an internationalist, and you have a group of senators who want to be isolationists. So what was the sticking point? Why would people not want to be involved in the League? So this treaty was ratified, and the United States was never ratified, and the United States never joined the League of Nations. And this was the controversy over the League. In the League of Nations Charter, it said that members of the League undertake to respect and preserve as against external aggression the territorial and integrity and existing political independence of all members of the League. In case of any such aggression, or in case of any threat or danger of such aggression, the Council shall advise upon the means by which this obligation shall be fulfilled. So it's this line here. In case of any such aggression, or in case of any threat or danger of such aggression, the Council shall advise upon the means by which the obligation shall be fulfilled. The Council shall advise. That was the sticking point, because in some minds, in the Senate's minds, that meant that the Council could tell the United States when they had to go to war. And senators didn't want some international organization telling Americans when they had to go to war. They wanted that right themselves. They didn't want some outside international group to decide when American boys went off to war. That's the part they disagreed with. In the second part of this controversial section, it said any war or threat of war, whether immediately affecting any members of the League or not, is hereby declared a matter of concern for the whole League. So it could be some matter of war in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, and it was declared a matter of concern for the whole League. Americans wanted to go back into isolationism. This is not what they were thinking about. They did not want to get involved in something that might lead them into more wars. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a series of cartoons, and we're going to decide whether or not you agree that we should not have joined the League of Nations, or you disagree. You think it was a good idea. if we had done it. All right. We know we don't. So you guys have to decide, was that right that we didn't, or was it wrong that we didn't? That's what we're looking at. All right. So this is probably the most important of all the cartoons we're going to look at. It's a pretty famous cartoon. It has a lot of details. And remember, the first thing you do is look at the cartoon in total first. Get a whole kind of general idea of what's going on here. All right. So the general idea of what's going on here, obviously, is there's a wedding going on. All right. So that's the first thing you should gather from it. And the title, like Miss Greenberg always says, you know, interrupting the ceremony. Okay. And who's interrupting the ceremony in this case? The U.S. Senate. And if you notice, in his hand here is a document, and it says constitutional rights. And that right is the right to declare war. So he's busting through the window, right? I love this little guy here. His feet are up. He's like, whoa, what's going on? So what we have here is a couple of other figures, right? You have so if we were to take the diagram and kind of, whoops, sorry. We're going to kind of take it in half and then put it across. In this section, right, in this quarter of the diagram, you have Uncle Sam here. And he's being married to foreign entanglements, which was what Washington warned us against. And the pastor here, he's reading from the League of Nations. If any man can show just cause why they may not lawfully be joined together, let him now speak. And boom, through the window comes a U.S. Senate. We have a problem. We're interrupting the ceremony. We won't want them to be married. All right? Because it violates our constitutional rights to decide on our own whether or not we want to be involved in a war. All right, so that's the first argument, that it's a violation of the Constitution. Another argument here is it violates Washington's principle of isolationism and neutrality. All right, moving on to the next document. Okay, so the next one is another document. Look at it in total, right? Get an idea what's going on. It's a pretty easy one, I think, in a lot of respects. So then we take the little drawing. That's a terrible line I just made, and we do it this way. And we have the League of Nations, and it's tying Uncle Sam's hands, right? England's pulling one way, Japan pulling the other European nations pulling it this way, foreign nations pulling it that way. Uncle Sam's hands are tied. He can't decide for himself what he wants to do. And remember, that was one of the issues that people against the League didn't like about it. It was like we were giving up our power. Right, what they called their sovereignty. We're going to take the League is going to take it away from us. Our hands are going to be tied. We can't decide for ourselves. All right, so now this one is an argument for why we should join the League. Okay, because we don't have to draw the cross on this one right now, because what's going on here is you got this big bad dog, and it's the dog of war. All right, and he's foaming at the mouth. He got fangs, and he's being muzzled by the League of Nations. Right. He's being muzzled by the League of Nations. And that's what the goal was. If you have the League, you won't have war. So this is an argument for us joining the League. All right. Another argument for, all right, and kind of the same type of argument, right? This is the League of Nations. It represents a lock here. And this is our victory in the war against Germany, right? This guy with the German helmet on. Whoops. Sorry about that. So our victory, he represents the German with that German helmet on, war, and the League of Nations, once we join it, we'll lock it up, and war won't be in our future anymore. All right, this one, a lot of details going on here. All right, so got to take a look at it in total, and look for the title. In this case, it's down here, the prospective stepfather. So we're to assume that this guy here, the League of Nations, is the stepfather, and he's kind of on his knee proposing here to Mother Earth. And you have all these children on the outside of the window. Uncle Sam being a child here, very old-looking child. Wonder if he'll try to boss us around. And that idea again of, you know, that we want to be in charge of our own destiny. We don't want some international organization telling us what to do. So for this one, you're going to take your left-hand side, and you're just going to answer this question. Would you have been in favor or opposed to the Treaty of Versailles and the League of Nations? So looking at all those cartoons, make a claim. Are you in favor of the League of Nations or are you opposed to it? Why? And then use evidence from the political cartoons to back up your reasoning and your claim. All right? All right, good luck.